would you do if your freedom papers were nothing more than ink on a page and the man who owned you yesterday strode back into your life today, waving a contract that said you still belonged to him? My name is Annabelle Turner. 3 months ago, I believed I was finally free. Today, I sit in the parlor of that same man's mansion, wearing his late wife's dress, raising his fragile little girl, while every heartbeat whispers run. Yet here I am, about to tell you how the chains that once bruised my wrists became the very iron that forged my soul, and how the man who paid for my captivity knelt at my feet to return the money and beg for something he never thought he could lose: my love and my forgiveness. If my story stirs a memory in your chest, tap like, hit subscribe, and meet me in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from, because no matter how far apart we live, pain and hope speak the same tongue. I was born on a cotton plantation an hour west of Savannah, Georgia, under a July sun so hot the fields shimmered like waves. Folks, they called me Gus's bright girl because my papa taught me letters after dark, tracing shapes in the dirt behind the smokehouse. He said freedom starts in the mind long before it reaches the feet. Freedom, though, took its sweet time coming. When Abraham Lincoln's proclamation reached us, I was 24. The war thundered past our cabins like a storm we could hear but couldn't see. And then silence. No guns. Just a Union colonel reading words none of us dared to dream aloud. I left that day with nothing but Papa's Bible and Mama's shawl. I went north on blistered feet. Certain book learning would carve me a place in this brand new country. For a breath of time, it did. I hired myself out as a schoolroom maid in Augusta, sweeping chalk dust while memorizing every lesson on the slate. But freedom paper is thin and greed cuts deep. In March of '66, a lawyer arrived with a notarized bill of sale claiming I was property in transit, never lawfully emancipated. A lie, yet one dressed so finely in legal ink, the sheriff refused to look beneath. I was marched south again, sold for $300 in a private parlor to Mr. Silas Whitford Cotton, magnate widower, Confederate veteran. His only demand: raise my daughter so she remembers her mama's gentility. Little Emmeline was barely too blue-eyed, feverish, motherless. Silas needed an AMA, and that was all I was meant to be. Nothing more, nothing less. He never guessed the alphabet dance behind my eyes. But secrets don't stay buried when grief walks the halls at night. A child cries for stories her dead mother can't tell. Over the next 8 chapters, you'll hear how a freed woman can be stolen twice in a country that calls itself healed. The forbidden midnight lessons I whispered to Emmeline. Lessons punishable by whipping or worse, the day Silas caught us reading his dead wife's Bible, and the world tilted. The hidden history of my family. And the ruthless broker who forged that bill of sale, how Silas faced the men who'd swindled him, and what it cost his fortune. Why the town church locked its doors when he asked to marry me. The fire that nearly took Emmeline's life, and the vow Silas made in the smoke. The courtroom battle that turned a Georgia statute on its head and wrote our love into law. Each part will end with a breath held tight. So you'll stay with me, just as I stayed when every instinct screamed to flee. Take my hand, friend. The road is long, but I promise the dawn at the end is worth every mile of night. CTA reminder: like, subscribe, share your hometown below. Now, let me start at the day Silas Whitford bought me like kettle iron and changed the course of 3 hearts forever. I still remember the smell of that March morning, damp sweetness of pine and the lingering smoke from distant brush fires. Augusta was waking slow, like an old hound stretching after winter. I'd finished sweeping the schoolhouse steps and was rinsing chalk from my apron when the rider peered. A man in a gray frock coat far too fine for the mud-splashed road. He dismounted, tied his horse, and strode toward the headmistress's office with boots that clacked like a judge's gavel. Something in my bones said trouble, but I kept my head down, polishing brass doorknobs until my reflection stared back anxious and blurry. Minutes later, the door creaked open. Miss Lillian Hardwicke, Yankee reformer, proud of her abolitionist, pin-stepped onto the porch, pale as linen. "Annabelle," she whispered, fingers trembling around a sealed envelope. "They say you were never freed." The world tilted. My freedom paper signed by Union Colonel Elijah Collins, countersigned by Freedmen's Bureau Agent Harris, was tucked in my trunk beneath 3 spare dresses and Mama's shawl. I had studied its curves by lamplight the way some girls gaze at wedding rings. How could anyone claim it false? Miss Hardwick tried to argue, I later learned. But the lawyer unfurled a document thick with red wax and Confederate seals, declaring me absconded chattel. The sheriff, newly elected, hungry for planter, votes backed him. Within an hour, I was in leg irons again, wrists bound with rawhide as if the war had never been. They let me gather my belongings under guard. I cradled Papa's Bible like a newborn, pressed Mama's shawl to my cheek, and dared the deputy to stop me from taking the freedom papers. He laughed, said a colored woman's word was wind against official ink. They marched me to the courthouse square for public auction. But Silas Whitford met them there with a private bill of sale already signed. I was sold before the sun reached its peak. Priced like a mule, $300 cash. People talk about chains clanging, whips cracking, babies torn from arms, but no one speaks of the silence that follows. The hush inside your skull when you realize hope can be repossessed, like unpaid furniture. Silas watched the exchange with an air I mistook for indifference. Tall, raw-boned, still wearing a frayed Confederate captain's coat, though the Confederacy was dust. His eyes, a pale ash gray, flicked over me not with lust or cruelty, but assessment, the way a farmer inspects soil before planting. Hated him for that cool gaze until years later I learned he'd spent the night before vomiting from drink, trying to forget the empty cradle in his nursery. We traveled south by wagon, passing fields where freedmen worked now for pay so thin it felt like satire. Some lifted their caps in sympathy. Others turned away, unable to witness bondage resurrected. I held their silent prayers like fire in my chest. Silas's plantation lay an hour outside Savannah, along the Ogeechee River white-columned house front. Cotton gins out back, cabins sagging in the moss. Yet the place felt half-dead, shutters closed, rose bushes wilted, servants moving like ghosts. Grief had settled over Whitford Hall, heavier than Spanish moss. He led me to a blue room tucked beside the nursery. "You answer to Miss Emmeline," he said, pushing open the door. "Girl won't eat since her mama passed. Doctor claims she wasted away by summer." He rubbed his temples as if the very thought pained him. "I'm not asking you to pick cotton or polish silver. Just keep my child alive." I wanted to scream, "I am not the miracle you need." Instead, I nodded. Survival teaches a body to bend where it cannot break. Emmeline lay curled in a crib, too. Grand for her frail shape, blonde curls matted, cheeks hollow. She stared at me with eyes the color of morning sky after rain. Eyes like hers used to fetch high prices in the slave marts of New Orleans for fancy girls. The thought made bile rise. I hummed Mama's hymn, the one about rivers flowing into freedom, and her lashes fluttered. Small fingers wrapped round mine, weak but willing. In that moment I understood this child was as captive as I trapped by loss, by her father's sorrow, by society's iron cage of race and class. We were two souls chained in different ways, tossed into the same dark cell. Perhaps the key to one lock might fit the other. That night, after the house went still, I lit a stub of candle and opened Papa's Bible. Emmeline stirred, eyes wide, watching letters dance beneath the flame. I traced out with her thumb, whispered, "This one's for Angel." The child smiled for the first time in weeks. I didn't hear Captain Whitford's boots until his shadow filled the doorway. "What in God's name are you teaching my daughter at this hour?" His voice cracked like timber splitting anger, fear, something. Else, I closed the Bible slow, covering its words with my palm. Would he whip me, sell me again, or listen? Stick with me, friend. The answer to that question changed the fate of a grieving widower, a silent child, and a woman who refused to let freedom die a second time. Captain Whitford's silhouette filled the nursery doorway, candlelight carving hollows beneath his cheekbones. I had seen Master's rage over Sear's foam, but the expression on his face was neither. It was confusion, like a man startled awake from a nightmare, unsure which world was real. Answer me, he rasped. What are you doing with that book? I kept my voice low. Emmeline's small fingers still curled around mine. Reading scripture to hush her fears, sir? His gaze dropped to Papa's Bible balanced on my lap. You can read a statement, not a question. In Georgia, such a thing was illegal just months ago. Old habits of law die slower than wars. He stepped inside, shut the door, then spoke in a tone softer than I expected. Where did you learn? My father taught me by lamplight. I did not add while hiding from patrols that would cut his tongue for it. He knelt beside the crib, studying Emmeline. Her eyelids fluttered, but she did not wake. Peace sat on her chest like a sleeping kitten. When he spoke again, his voice carried wonder tinged with shame. 2 doctors, 3 wet nurses, and a dozen prayer circles, none calmed her like you just did. I dared meet his eyes. Words carry medicine, Captain, even for wounds we cannot see. His mouth tightened. Teach her letters if it eases her grief, but do it where no one else can see. There are men on this estate who would beat us both for it, me for allowing, you for daring. Beat 'em? I almost laughed, and I caught the tremor in his hand. As he brushed a curl from Emmeline's brow, fear was real, and he wore it like an ill-fitting coat. Before leaving, he turned at the threshold. What's that hymn you sang? River of Mercy, sir, my mama's lullaby. Sing it again, he whispered. And I did soft enough that only memory could hear. For weeks after, our lessons bloomed in secret. Each night after lamps, Goddard and servants vanished to their cabins, I crept to the nursery with chalk and a broken slate. Emmeline greeted me with conspiratorial giggles, as though letters were fireflies we chased through darkness. We spelled her name, then mine. Then words she chose, Mama, Flower, Star. She learned fast hunger is a sharp tutor. And her hunger for connection outpaced any fear of punishment. Silas, he told me to call him Silas, behind closed doors began stopping by at odd hours, pretending to check window latches or bring extra blankets. Truth was, he wanted to listen. Sometimes he lingered in the hall. Other times he sat in the rocker, shadows hiding the wetness in his eyes. When Emmeline traced Lovie across his palm, he excused himself so quickly his boots squeaked on. Polished pine. Daylight painted a different picture. On porches and in cotton rows, folks still called him captain or master, tongues slow to trade old titles for new. He walked stiff-backed among them, grief hardening into stone. One afternoon, I carried Emmeline to the orchard for fresh air. We found Silas beneath a pecan tree, crumpled ledger in hand. At our approach, he shoved the papers inside his coat. Show Papa our new letter, I prompted. Emmy whispered the sound of pea, then pointed to a branch heavy with fruit. Silas's eyes widened, pride and fear wrestling in his chest. He tucked Emmy's curl behind her ear, then murmured so low, only I heard. Careful. Neighbors learn my child studies with a colored woman. They'll drag me before the county judge. Let them, I said, voice steady. Your house. Your child, your rule, so says the new Constitution. Constitution won't shield you from shotgun justice, he replied. Nor me from ruin. Ruin already stalked him. Plantation profits had withered since emancipation. Half his laborers left for wages upstate. Debts mounted. Twice he rode to Savannah to negotiate cotton prices, returning hollow-eyed. Yet each night he asked about Emmy's progress, as though her budding words were a lantern guiding him through. Fiscal fog. One rainy night, thunder growling like cannons reborn, he entered the nursery carrying a battered violin. "Carol, my late wife, played for Emmy," he said. Music used to quiet the storms. He lifted the bow with trembling fingers. The first note fractured midair. I watched a proud man choke on memory. "Would you help me tune?" I asked. I had never touched a violin, but Papa taught me pitch using willow whistles. Together, we coaxed the strings into harmony. Emmy clapped. Thunder forgotten. Silas met my gaze, gratitude mixed with something perilously close to trust. Trust is a fragile bird. The world loves to break its wings. The breaking came by way of Sheriff Wade Billings, same man who ignored my freedom. Papers months prior. He arrived one morning, spurs clacking on Whitford's porch. Badge gleaming like a polished dollar. "Captain," he drawled loud enough for curtains to twitch. "County heard rumors you keeping an unlawful teacher under your roof?" Educating whites a nigger, he caught himself, glancing at me where I stood half hidden in the hall, collar odds together. "That's so." Silas straightened, gray eyes cold. "Miss Turner is my contracted domestic. What she does in my home is no business of the county." Billings smirked. "Contract, huh? I recall a bill of sale. Says here she's property still, pending proper emancipation documentation." He tapped a folder bristling with warrants. "A teach in white. Children letters sounds like incitin' rebellion." My throat closed. Emmy peeked from behind my skirt, clutching her horn book. Silas stepped between us. "Sheriff, Georgia law now recognizes freedmen's rights. Any attempt to seize Miss Turner will be challenged in federal court." Billings laughed. "Federal's a long ride, Captain. Meanwhile, county jail's real close." He reached for my arm. I flinched, but before skin met skin, Silas swung, fist cracking against the sheriff's jaw. Billings staggered back, hand flying to his holster. Emmy screamed. Time slowed. I heard the click of iron, smelled black powder even before the gun cleared leather. I shoved Emmy behind the rocker, spread arms wide. Sheriff Billings aimed square at my chest. The hammer fell with a metallic snap hand. I wondered if the alphabet would die with me, letters scattering like doves into thunder. The sheriff's revolver bucked. Thunder split the nursery a breath before the real storm. Outside caught up. For a heartbeat, I felt nothing, only the acrid tang of smoke and Emmy's sobs behind the rocker. Then Silas's body lurched across my view like a toppled oak. Blood spattered the pale blue wall, blooming against the paint in grisly flowers. The bullet had found him, not me. Wade Billings stood dumbstruck, gun still trained. He hadn't meant to shoot the white landowner. I saw it in the way his mouth fell, open in the tremor that seized his hand. He lowered the weapon, mumbling curses. But before he could speak, I was already on the floor, pressing my shawl to Silas's side where crimson pulsed between my fingers. "Papa," Emmy screamed. Tiny feet pattered. I shrieked for her to stay. "Back!" She froze, cheeks splotched with terror. Billings staggered, backing toward the hallway as though hoping the walls might swallow him and the memory alike. I shouted, voice ragged, "Go fetch the doctor, Sheriff, if you've a shred of Christian decency." Maybe it was the glare in my eyes, maybe the thought of hanging for murder. He spun and thundered down the stairs. Silas's breath came in wet gasps. I'd seen gun wounds before mini-balls in war camps, slave catchers' muskets gone astray. Some men bled slow and lived. Others gushed like spring rivers and were gone by sunset. I pressed harder. His fingers clutched my wrist. "Annabelle," he wheezed, "if I don't?" "Make it." "No," I hissed, tears blurring my sight. "Listen." He coughed, lips frothing pink. "Chest desk documents. Your papers. Deed of manumission, signed. Each phrase, a battlefield. I'm gone. Take Emmy. Leave this place." Lightning flashed, illuminating terror on Emmy's face. The storm rattled window panes. I prayed its roar might muffle cries reaching. Curious ears, minutes crawled like hours before Dr. Horace Dale burst in. Coat flapping, spectacles fogged. He pushed me aside with a brusque kindness. Bandages, laudanum sewing needle. I aided him, held the lamp, cut thread with my teeth, recited Psalm 23 under my breath. Emmy clung to my skirt in silence, small body trembling each time her father moaned. At dawn, Silas lay feverish, yet breathing. The bullet had lodged shallow crack to rib. Missed the lung by Providence's whim. Dr. Dale predicted weeks in bed, but a fair chance of recovery. Sheriff Billings never returned. Word reached us that he'd ridden straight to Savannah, claiming outlaws ambushed him on the river road. Cowwood left town rather than face the eyes of men who'd once cheered his badge, while Silas drifted in laudanum dreams. Plantation rumor mills churned. Some swore Yankees shot him. Others blamed colored rebels. I kept Emmy inside, doors bolted, lessons whispered. Every creak on the stair sounded like shackles. 3 nights later, Silas woke lucid, beckoned me close. Moonlight silvered his pallid cheeks. You stayed, he croaked. Where else would I be? He searched my face. Oh, you, more than life. Sheriff'll try pin blame on you, on us. Need to get ahead of it. Doctor knows truth, I said. But doctor's testimony ain't always enough for white juries, Captain. I'm bitter. Smile. Then we'll use money whatever's left to buy every witness God can spare. I wanted to scoff. Tell him silver cannot purchase justice for folks our color. Yet his determination sparked hopa, dangerous fire, but warm all the same. Promise me, he whispered, if I fail, to fight anyway. For Emmy, for your papers. I covered his hand with mine. I'll fight, but you will not fail. Silas's shooting became newspaper fodder. Headlines shrieked, prominent planter wounded by vagrant Negro. Dr. Dale wrote a sworn statement naming Sheriff Billings the shooter, but county editors buried it on page 4. Lies sell. Truth limps behind. 2 weeks passed. Silas healed slow, yet each dawn he asked for case updates like a general from his sickbed. I carried letters between him and a freedman's bureau. Lawyer Mr. Jeremiah T. Walshtall, red-haired Bostoner, who smelled of ink and righteous fury. Walsh dug up the forged bill of sale, traced it to a Savannah broker already under indictment for kidnapping freed people. Ammunition for court. But bullets breed bullets. One evening, returning from the telegraph office, I saw a noose hung on. Our gatepost 3 knots, loop swinging in wind. A note pinned beneath. Letters won't save you. Rope is quicker. I burned the note before Emmy could see. Fear coiled round my spine, yet I marched inside, Bible in hand, and resumed her. Lesson, courage, I spelled C-O-U-R-G. That night, after Emmy slept, I sat at Silas's bedside. Lantern glow framed him gaunt yet resolute. They'll come again, I said. Maybe with fire instead of rope. Then we'll light. Our own fire first, he answered, voice thin but fierce. Court hearing is set for Monday. Walsh will present your birth record, eyewitness depositions. I'll testify the sheriff tried to reclaim you unlawfully. His hand trembled. I clasped it. That testimony could strip you of land, reputations already bleeding on that wall, he muttered, nodding to the bullet hole we hadn't patched. Land I can rebuild. My honor, I cannot. Outside, thunder rumbled distant, though skies were clear. I felt another kind of storm building, the kind waged in courtrooms and drinking halls. Fueled by hatred, afraid to die, Savannah's courthouse loomed white and pompous, marble columns gleaming like new money, colored folk-lined fences, whispering prayers. Emmy stayed with Dr. Dale's wife. Silas rode beside me in a wagon, cane across his lap. Inside, gasps rippled as we entered arm in arm. Wounded Confederate officer escorting a Negro woman in calico. I kept eyes forward, remembering Papa's words, hold your chin high. Let them trip on their own pride. Judge Harrison Caldwell, Whiskers waxed inspected documents with bored disdain until Walsh slid forth evidence of Billings's corruption. Forged bills, kickback ledgers, witnessed affidavits. Murmurs spread like brushfire. Billings's attorney sputtered objections. Caldwell overruled. Then arose the question of my status. Walsh produced baptism registry from First African Church. Signed 1842 free-colored child Annabelle Turner, plus Colonel Collins's emancipation certificate. The judge squinted, adjusted spectacles, harumphed. Sheriff Billings asserted, Miss Turner property, Caldwell drawled. Sheriff nowhere present to defend claim, gavel rapped. This court recognizes Annabelle Turner as free citizen of the United States. Applause burst from gallery, quickly hushed by bailiff. But the echo pulsed in my veins. Tears blurred the bench until it shimmered like hot horizon. Yet victory tasted of ash when Caldwell added, As to the alleged assault on Captain Whitford, charges may proceed against Sheriff Billings. Warrant to be issued. A hollow triumph. If the sheriff remained vanished, we stepped into noon sun, blinking like newborns. Freed people pressed close, cheering. Silas swayed. I steadied him. Walsh shook our hands, promising federal backup if Billings resurfaced. But danger seldom waits. On paperwork, that evening while we supped on cornbread in the quiet kitchen, hoofbeats thundered up the lane. Emmy peeked through shutters. Mama Bell, men on horses' lots. I swept her into my arms. Silas grabbed his cane, eyes steeled. Torches flickered outside, voices chanting hateful hymns. A single rock smashed through the window, scattering glass across the table. Someone outside bellowed, Send out the nigger school teacher or we'll burn the devil out. Silas met my gaze. Time to decide, Annabelle, run, or stand. My answer would seal our fate tanned, perhaps Georgia's, too. Firelight licked the magnolia trunks, casting giants on the lawn. The riders' faces hidden by burlap hoods and wartime slouch had circled Whitford Hall like wolves, testing a wounded stag. Some carried rifles, others rope. All carried hate. Silas braced on his cane, shoulders squared though pain bent his. Ribs. I set Emmy behind the kitchen doorframe with a stern whisper. Stay quiet. Remember the alphabet game? If you hear A, you hide until Z. She nodded, eyes wide as moons. Another rock crashed through the parlor window, clattering across hardwood. Then a voice I recognized, Deputy Charles Riggs. Billings's drinking partner ordered, Bring out that fancy talkin' colored girl. We aimed to finish what the sheriff started. Silas strode to the front hall, pumped the action on his late father's shotgun. Over my dead body, he muttered, That's exactly the idea. Riggs barked back. My lungs fluttered like trapped sparrows. Running was useless. They'd torched the house with Emmy inside. Standing passive meant lynching. Papa's Bible held no verse on fighting night riders. But Mama's whispered faith said, God helps those who help themselves. I slipped into the pantry, rummaged for the lye bucket nasty stuff used for soap making, found it heavy and caustic, slung the strap over my shoulder, grabbed 2 oil lamps and a jar of turpentine. War turns teachers into tacticians. Silas cracked the door a hand's width. Charles, these grounds are private, Riggs laughed. State of Georgia's private. Captain, and she's trespass. To claim trespass, you'd need a warrant. Did Billings forget to forge one? Jeers answered him. A rifle muzzle poked the door. Silas slammed it shut. Wood splintered. Emmy squealed from behind the staircase. I met Silas's gaze. No words, just a plan born in shared urgency. He limped to the upstairs landing, positioning himself above the foyer with shotgun leveled at the entry. I doused 1 lamp with turpentine. Stuffed a rag into its neck, the way Union soldiers had shown freedmen how to scare off raiders. I lit the rag from the stove flame, heart hammering. Annabelle, Silas called. They've breached the porch, my cue. I flung the makeshift firebomb through the shattered parlor window. It exploded in a blossom of heat, igniting porch railings. Riders reared back, horses screaming. I followed with a second lamp, this time at the side door. Flames jumped to the eaves, controlled enough to deter, but wild enough to spook. Chaos erupted. Riggs cursed, ordering men to douse the blaze. Some dismounted with buckets. Others fired blindly at windows. Pellets shattered china behind me. I ducked, unscrewed the lye bucket, and splashed a trail across the front steps. White caustic powder billowed, mixing with smoke to form a choking mist. Silas fired one spume, echoing like thunder over thunder. A hooded figure toppled from horseback, guns skidding across gravel. The mob faltered. Next shots for your ringleader. Silas bellowed. Deputy Riggs, coughing from smoke and lye, yanked off his hood. You'll swing for shootin' a deputy. Arson, attempted murder. Kidnapping, stack your charges, Charles. I'll match 'em with mine. Flames crackled. Horses bolted toward the river road. One rider tossed a torch at the porch but missed. It landed in the lye patch and fizzled. The mob's nerve broke like a rotten plank. Within minutes, the yard emptied, hoofbeats fading into night. Silas sagged against the banister, shotgun barrel smoking. I rushed to douse porch fires with pump water, my arms trembling but determined. Emmy crawled from hiding, clutching her rag. "Doll, are we safe now? Mama Belle?" she whispered. For tonight, I breathed, pulling her close. My heart still raced, yet a fierce calm settled over me, like stepping out of a storm into sunrise. They had come to snuff us out. Instead, they fled, branded by their own cowardice. Dr. Dale arrived at dawn, summoned by our stable boy who rode through the night. He stitched a graze on Silas's arm splinter from a bullet that bit the banister and prescribed rest. Eyes blazed brighter than any fever. "No more hiding," he declared. "Daylight will expose them." We walked the damage, charred porch beams, scorched wisteria, bullet holes peppering shutters. Yet house still stood. Emmy asked to water the singed roses. Her innocence watered something in me to dash resolve. By noon, news spread. Former slaves working nearby farms came offering rifles handed down from Union troops. Freedwomen brought pots of stew, patching bullet holes with laughter and nails. Even a few poor white sharecroppers, tired of planter bullies, stopped to hammer new boards. Sheriff Billings remained missing, but Deputy Riggs slunk into town nursing burn blisters. His tale of wild Negro insurrection earned little sympathy. Townsfolk whispered he'd shot a white man on his own porch. Reputation, like fruit, can rot from a single bruise. Meanwhile, Lawyer Walsh petitioned federal marshals for protection. A telegram came. U.S. deputy arrives Friday. 2 days, .2. Days felt both eternity and eye blink. That evening, as Emmy traced the letters C in ash on the hearth, Silas handed me a sealed envelope. "My confession," he said, "to be opened if I die." Inside, I later found 3 items. A confession written in Silas's hand admitting he purchased me unlawfully, naming the broker and Sheriff Billings. Transfer of half his estate into a trust for Emmeline under my guardianship. A proposal, plain words: "If you'll have me, marry me when peace returns, so our daughter may grow." Under one name, I read the letter thrice, tears smudging ink. Marriage could paint an even bigger target on our backs, yet my heart beat yes to every fear. Still, I placed the papers back, sealed them, and hid them under a floor plank. Love must wait until survival is certain. Clouds bruised the horizon. As federal deputies rode up the lane blue uniforms stark against Georgia red clay. Riggs reappeared too, forced to escort them per judge's order. His scowl peeled paint. Deputy Marshal Grant took statements under oath. Workers testified to the raid, Dr. Dale to the shooting, Silas to property damage. My own testimony came last. I stood on the porch where blood still stained planks despite scrubbing. Grant asked Miss Turner, "What led the attackers here?" Met Riggs's glare head-on: "Education, sir. They fear a woman teaching a white child to read." A murmur rippled through the laborers gathered. Grant nodded gravely, writing. Ignorance often fires the torches. He cuffed Riggs on charges of aggravated assault, attempted arson, and conspiracy to kidnap. The deputy stared at Silas. Traitor, he spat, as marshals hauled him to. The wagon. Silas leaned on his cane but stood tall. Good riddance. When wheels rolled away, a hush settled. Then Emmy's voice rang. Does this mean bad men are gone for good? Silas knelt, wincing, and hugged her. The law's chasing. Them, honey? But healing a land takes longer than catching a man. I felt eyes on me, farmhands, sharecroppers, townsfolk lining the fence. People who'd seen a white planter defend a black woman's right to teach. Something shifted in that silent crowd, a seam in the fabric of hatred loosening stitch by stitch. But as twilight fell, a letter arrived from Savannah Courthouse. Trial of Sheriff Billings postponed. Key witness missing. The broker who forged my bill of sale had fled long with every ledger proving Billings's crimes. Without him, justice teetered, and so did our fragile peace. Silas folded the letter, jaw set. The devil won't come to court, he said. Then court must ride to the devil. I knew what he meant. A journey south into enemy shadows. To hunt the truth ourselves. The road ahead would test love, law, and the limits of courage, but turning back was no longer an option. Dawn smelled of gun oil and wet magnolia when Silas saddled 2 horses at the edge of the orchard. He winced with every stretch of his healing ribs, but determination stiffened his spine. I tucked Emmy's favorite rag doll into my satchel, token of home she could cling to while we were gone, and pressed a kiss to her curls where she slept against. Dr. Dale's wife. The child stirred, half dreaming. Bring Papa back, she mumbled. I promised we both would return. Silas passed me a revolver wrapped in linen. Never shot one, I confessed. Aim steady, squeeze slow, he said. God help the man who stands in your way. We rode south by river roads, avoiding towns swirling with gossip. Marshland opened into cypress gloom. Spanish moss draped, branches like funeral veils. Somewhere in that tangle, the broker Jericho Lyle ran a hidden slave pen years after surrender, forging deeds, redistributing human lives for coin. At dusk, we reached a derelict fishing village where barges once loaded cotton bales. Now only gators patrolled the docks. We tethered horses under live oaks and approached a shack stilted above brackish waterlast. Known haunt of Lyle according to Walsh's informants. Floorboards creaked beneath our boots. A lantern guttered inside, casting crooked shadows. Silas rapped the door with his cane. No answer. He pushed. The latch gave stench of whiskey and mildew hit like a wave. Papers littered a table, bills of sale, ledgers spotted with dried mud. My eyes darted for familiar scrawl. There, in smeared ink, the line that had once priced me at $300. A tremor rippled through my hands. Silas whispered, "Take what you need for evidence." I gathered pages into my satchel, heart racing. A floorboard groaned behind us. Jericho Lyle stepped from the dark corner, pistol leveled, beard matted, eyes feral. Silas shielded me instinctively. Lyle cocked the hammer. Paper-thieving Yankee lovers don't belong here. Silas raised his empty hand. You forged those documents, sold free men and women like livestock. You'll answer in Savannah, Lyle spat. I answered to no court run by carpetbaggers. His finger tightened. I remembered Silas's lesson: aim steady, squeeze slow. My gun cleared linen, barrel glinting in lamplight. Drop it, Mr. Lyle. My voice surprised even Meekum as Stillwater. He snorted. A colored wench thinks she can, Shot thundered. His pistol flew from his grip, smashed window behind him. Smoke curled from Silas's cane-hidden shotgun barrel he'd crafted after the raid. Next one's your kneecap, he growled. Lyle, shaking, raised empty hands. We bound him with rope scavenged from the dock, forced him outside toward our horses. Night insects shrilled. Fog crept over the marsh like pale breath. Halfway to the trail, distant hoofbeats echoed. Lanterns bobbed among cypress trunk sticks. Maybe 8 riders? Billings's remnants hunting us. We dragged Lyle beneath a fallen log as torchlight converged. Silas's pain showed in clenched jaw, but he steadied the shotgun. I cocked my revolver, heart hammering. Voices drifted, men arguing, dogs whining. A torchbearer called out, "Jericho, you in there?" Another spat. "If that Yankee sympathizer took our papers, we'll hang." Both. Lyle's eyes darted to me, desperate. "Tie me, I'll talk them down." Silas hissed, "You'll feed us to them." Wheels in my mind spun. The ledgers mattered more than this man. Without them, Billings might slip noose. I leaned close. "Tell them we crossed river by boat. You'll walk free once we're gone." Lies tasted bitter, but survival demanded them. He nodded, frantic. I pressed barrel to his side as Silas loosened ropes enough for movement. Torchlight neared. We shoved Lyle upright, whispers quick. "Lead them west, by us an hour." He stumbled toward clearing, shouting, "Over here." Riders circled, questioning. We slipped opposite direction, sliding through water up to thighs, clutching satchel. High cypress roots clawed the sky. Frogs croaked warnings. We waited until torches faded, then hauled ourselves onto a muddy bank, lit only by stars. Silas collapsed, breath ragged. Blood seeped through bandage stitch torn during struggle. Ripped a sleeve, pressed cloth to wound. He grimaced. "Keep moving. Not till bleeding stopped," I insisted. Minutes passed. Night hissed with unseen life. A sudden splash gator or worse, we froze. Insect song fell silent, replaced by low growl of dogs again, closer than before. Lyle had betrayed us after all. Silas tried to stand. Legs buckled. "Go," he rasped. "Save the documents. I'm not leaving," I snapped. I stuffed ledgers into oilskin pouch, slung it around my neck, then gripped his arm. Together, we staggered deeper into marsh, guided by stars toward River Bend, where ferries ran at dawn, dogs bayed behind. Rifle cracks sparked in shadows, bullets slicing leaves. We ducked under hanging moss, hearts drumming. Up ahead, the marsh, open to moonlit water and an abandoned flatboat roped to a cypress stump. Providence again. We tumbled aboard. I hacked rope loose with pocket knife. Muscles burned as I shoved pole against muck. Boat gliding into current. Gunfire echoed. Bullets slapped water yards away. Fog swallowed us, silver veil between life and death. Silas slumped, fever brightening his eyes. "All done?" I whispered. Pushing pole, breath ragged. Ledger pouch thumped my chest, tank in truth, heavier than gold. If we reached Savannah, Billings would face justice, Emmy would know safety, and maybe the promise sealed in Silas's letter could bloom. But marsh currents are treacherous. Boat lurched, water gushing through cracked plank. I plunged cloths to plug the breach, but damp would split farther. River hunters' lanterns glowed faint, behind pursuit relentless. The boat listed taking water. Silas's eyelids drooped. Clutched him, cold seep invading bones. "Stay with me," I begged out ahead. Through fog, a lone lantern bobbed on larger vessel ferry, making early run. Salvation within reach if current favored. I waved, shouting hoarse across dark water. Lantern! Stayed still, then turned away ferry, departing downstream. Our flatboat sank lower. Water lapped our knees. I faced a choice, abandon the ledgers to keep us afloat, or save truth and risk drowning. Cold fingers tightened round pouch strap as I weighed love against justice in the heart of a midnight river. The decision I made next would decide whether Emmy grew up fatherless or whether Giorgio finally heard the story ink could tell. I yanked the ledger pouch over my head, pressed it to Silas's chest, and wrapped his arms around it as if it were our only child. Then I kicked off my shoes, slid into the river, and felt the shock of water steal my breath. The flatboat groaned behind me, timbers surrendering with a hollow crack. I reached for Silas's collar. "When I pull, you float," I whispered. He mustered a weak nod. I lunged, muscles screaming, and we slipped over the side just as the boat folded into itself. Cold current gripped us, tugging like rough hands, but I angled toward the ferry, trusting moonlight to guide me. Every stroke sent knives through my shoulders. River silt scraped my feet. Behind angry shouts echoed dogs baying at the bank, men cursing the fog. Annabelle Silas choked. "Leave the papers. Save yourself." "Can't do that?" I spat River. "Water, truth's worth drowning for." Lantern light wavered ahead. I hollered again. At first, nothing, only oars creaking and water slapping hull butt. Then a silhouette leaned over the rail. "Hold on there," a gruff voice called. A rope splashed near us. I looped it under Silas's arms, then mine, and kicked hard. 2 men. On deck hauled until boards kissed my knees. I collapsed, coughing, clinging to Silas while he gasped like a landed fish. The ferryman weathered Negroes named Elijah and Moses gaped at our soaked state, then scanned gloom beyond. Gunshots. Snapped, bullets skipping off water. Elijah cursed. "Rebs with rifles. Ain't been safe since God was a boy." Moses hoisted a rusted shotgun from beneath a tarp and fired twice toward shore. Return fire ceased. Maybe fog thickened. Maybe fear. He spat. "They ain't keen on swimming, praise the Lord." We lay shivering beside crates of sorghum while Elijah trimmed sail, wind catching and carrying us downriver. Away from burning eyes dot by dawn. Savannah's masts pierced pink horizon. Elijah docked near a Union encampment and roused an army surgeon. They stretchered Silas to a field hospital. Steam rising from his clothes. Fever glazed his eyes. He drifted beneath morphine while orderlies cut away blood-drenched bandages. I dried by a potbelly stove. Fingers gripping ledger pouch so tight my knuckles ached. Captain George Rawlings of the Freedmen's Bureau arrived. Brass buttons bright against sky blue coat. He'd read Walsh's telegram. Forged papers, attempted, lynching, missing sheriff. I poured the ledgers onto his desk names, sums, county seals. Rawlings whistled low. "Enough evidence here to sink half the courthouse." "But only if Jericho Lyle testifies," I said. "He's run, maybe dead." Rawlings tapped ledger spine. "Paper weighs heavy even without a tongue. Still, a living witness seals it." He promised Pinkerton trackers on Lyle's trail, then offered me a cot in the infirmary. I shook my head. "Need to watch over Mr. Whitford?" 3 nights of vigil blurred into one. Fever dragged Silas through delirium. Sometimes he wept for Carol. Other times recited cotton tallies. I mopped, sweat, spooned water, hummed River of Mercy. On the 4th morning, his eyes found mine clear as daybreak. "Emmy," he croaked. "She's safe," I said, reading Psalms to Dr. Dale's chickens. He managed a thin smile. Rawlings. Entered with news. Deputy Riggs had confessed under interrogation named. Sheriff Billings and Jericho Lyle partners in forgery and illegal bondage. A federal judge scheduled a hearing in Savannah 2 weeks hence. "With your testimony," Rawlings said, "justice may finally set foot in Georgia." Silas gripped my hand. "We'll stand together." But justice has enemies with long arms. That night, Rawlings received wire. Sheriff Billings captured near Tallahassee. But local militia refused extradition, citing states' rights. Without the sheriff, county partisans aimed to stall proceedings. Some even threatened to storm the courthouse should a Negro woman testify against white officials. I paced the ward's lantern glow, ledger pressed to my breast. Fear gnawed, yet resolve burned hotter. "If court can't hold Billings," I told Rawlings, "try him in the papers. Print these ledgers for every soul from Atlanta to D.C." Rawlings grinned at the idea. Silas's strength returned by inches. He sat propped on pillows, reading speeches from Frederick Douglass that Rawlings lent him, eyes shining with new fire. One evening he reached inside his coat and produced a simple silver ring. "I meant to wait till the world calmed," he said, voice steady, "but storms seem endless. Will you take my name now? Whatever gale may come." Tears blurred the word. "Yes," I whispered. "I'll anchor beside you." He slid ring on my finger. Metal, cold, promise warm. Moses and Elijah whooped. Nurses wiped eyes. Our vows were unsaid but understood. To raise Emmy in truth, to fight until chains rusted into legend. We registered the marriage with Bureau Clerk's first interracial union recorded in Chatham County under Reconstruction law. Newspapers splashed. Headlines: Planter weds former slave tutor. Praise and venom reigned equal measure. Some called Silas a traitor. Others hailed him prophet of a new South. 1 week before the hearing, a bomb tore through the bureau office at midnight, scattering ledgers to flame. I raced there barefoot. Smoke curled into cotton-rich sky. Rawlings coughed, clutching charred. "Folders, backup copies," he wheezed. Triumphant, despite ashes, but my pouch the originals had been on his desk. I knelt amid embers. Fingertips brushing burnt leather. Pages gone, reduced to brittle flakes. Evidence still existed, but thinner, easier for cunning lawyers to shred. And Lyle remained missing. Silas, hobbling on crutch, found me outside dawn's glow. "We still have Riggs's confession," he said. "And your testimony." I nodded, though fear gnawed. That evening, Pinkerton telegram cracked through tension. Jericho Lyle cited boarding steamer for New Orleans, agents pursuing. Savannah hearing would proceed. But if Lyle escaped west, Billings's defense might claim forged papers rumor. Rawlings decided we must press charges, regardless force the narrative before public. Court day arrived humid. Courthouse packed. Emmy sat between Moses and Elijah, feet dangling. I took oath, sworn Bible heavy as the moment Papa once dreamed. I recounted kidnapping, forged bill, night riders, swamp escape. Every word felt like prying iron from old wounds. Defense attorney objected, claimed marital bias. Judge overruled. Spectators, murmured white ladies, fanned themselves. Friedman leaned forward, hungry for justice. When I described school lessons with Emmy, a juror's eyes softened. Another's jaw clenched. Then defense sprang trap. Produce original ledgers. I stated they burned in bombing. Laughter rippled. Attorney pressed. "So your entire claim rests on memory and confession of deputy facing prison?" He smirked. Judge glanced my way, sympathy tempered by law. My pulse pounded. Without direct documents, verdict teetered. Doors at back slammed open. Pinkerton man strode down aisle, dragging Jericho Lyle in shackles. Crowd gasped. He waved soot-stained envelope. Recovered from steamer, a full duplicate ledger. Defense sputtered. Judge ordered recess to examine evidence. Silas squeezed my hand. Hope reborn. But as deputies escorted Lyle to holding cell, single gunshot cracked outside. Someone tried to free him. Screams echoed through hallway. Court guards dashed out. Panic spread inside. I shielded Emmy as benches. Tipped, voices rising. In chaos, Lyle slipped bonds, bolted toward side door. Silas lurched after him. I followed, heart racing. We spilled into courtyard just as Lyle mounted a waiting horse, clutching ledger. Gunfire traded overhead. Silas raised his revolver, but stumbled. I seized his arm, steadying aim. One last chance. The ledger bobbed under Lyle's coat like dark heartbeat. I lifted my own weapon, remembering steady squeeze, and prayed the bullet would strike ink. Not flesh history, not life. Trigger eased. Back, I exhaled, sight steady. Squeezed the report, cracked like lightning off granite. Lyle jerked. The ledger burst from beneath his coat. Pages fluttering above the courtyard like frantic white doves. Whether the bullet struck paper or bone, I could not yet see. Dust and screams swallowed the scene, and the horse reared, eclipsing everything. In a whirl of hooves and rising ink-speck confetti, for one heartbeat the world paused, truth hanging in the air. Fragile as ash, then time lurched forward again, and I found myself running toward whatever ending that shot had chosen. Shot. Echoed, horse screamed, and Jericho Lyle toppled sideways, boot-catching stirrup. The gelding bolted, dragging him across packed clay before deputies seized the reins. I sprinted, skirts soaking dust, snatching at the drifting papers while Silas limped beside me, revolver still raised. One page slapped his chest my name, Price, and forged X of a non-existent cellar-stark proof that I'd been stolen twice, blood-streaked. Lyle's sleeve where the bullet grazed flesh, not life. Fortune spared him enough to stand trial. Pinkerton agents hauled him upright, snapping irons around his wrists, and gathered the scattered ledger leaves like sacred relics. Silas pressed a wad of linen to Lyle's arm. "Keep him breathing," he ordered. "The dead can't testify." Court reconvened under tense hush. Judge Caldwell's gavel struck. Jurors stared wide-eyed at the blood on my blouse. The torn papers spread across counsel table. Rawlings laid each recovered sheet. In plastic sleeves, smudged but legible, defense stammered. Their tale of fabricated forgery crumbled like week-old cornbread. Deputy Riggs brought in shackles, confirmed every scheme. Billings pocketed fees. Lyle falsified debts. Together, they trafficked a dozen freed people back into bondage. What? Asked why he confessed, Riggs glared at me. "'Cause that woman shot straight," he said, and I figured the Lord's aim was behind hers. Murmurs rippled, some admiring, some resentful. Caldwell cleared his throat. In light of overwhelming documentary and testimonial evidence, this court recognizes all deeds forged by Jericho Lyle as null. Further, Sheriff Wade Billings is hereby indicted for kidnapping, assault with intent to murder, and conspiracy. Gavel rapped once, twice, sealing words into record. Relief washed through me warm, unstoppable tears. Silas squeezed my hands so tight our rings clinked. Moses whooped. Elijah lifted Emmy atop his shoulders. Yet triumph tasted bittersweet, for justice on paper seldom budged the rot inside men's hearts. That night we returned to Whitford Hall under escort of 2 federal marshals. Porch beams still bore scorch marks. Bullet holes peppered shutters like pox. Emmy traced one with her finger. "Can we fix it now, Mama Bell?" I knelt. "We'll patch every scar inside and out." Silas met me beneath the ruined magnolia. Moonlight silvered his bandaged arm. "Courtroom victory is one thing," he whispered. "Keeping this place safe is another." "Then we arm ourselves with books," I said. "Ignorance fired those torches. Education will snuff them." The idea had sprouted while I testified the image of children, white and colored, sitting side by side in our parlor, learning letters that no law could unwrite. Within a fortnight we cleared, smoke-stained drapes and open doors wide. Freedmen hammered benches. Silas purchased slates and primers with funds from selling his last bale of cotton. Some neighbors scoffed, calling it blasphemy. Others, secretly curious, sent their children after dusk. Emmy greeted each newcomer as sister or brother. We named the place River of Mercy School, after Mama's hymn. Threats still came a broken window. A slur scrawled on gate, but marshals patrolled nightly, and our own resolve stood taller than columns. Even Dr. Dale's wife, once cautious, offered to teach arithmetic. One evening, I caught Silas reading Douglas's speeches to 3 former field hands. His accent tripped over syllables, yet hope carried every line. Weeks passed, harvest moon waxed. Riggs turned state's evidence. Billings extradited awaited trial in Savannah jail. Jericho Lyle, arm in sling, faced federal court, the same courthouse he'd fled. Rumor said he wept when sentenced to 10 years hard labor. Rumor also said I aimed to visit him with Bible in hand. Perhaps mercy, perhaps closure. I have not yet decided. One autumn morning, Emmy bounded into class, clutching wildflowers. "Papa says new paint for the house arrives today," she chirped. We cheered because restoration felt like breathing after too long underwater. Workers sanded bullet scars. Children, brushes in hand, dabbed bright colors across boards. Laughter, spilling through corridors where smoke once choked. Silas paused beside me, spattered with whitewash. K's sweeping the yard colored in white, children chasing spelling bees under mended magnolia limbs. "Never thought I'd see this day," he murmured. "Nor I," I replied. "But Papa always said freedom starts in the mind." He brushed paint from my cheek, eyes shining. "Mind, heart, and these hands of yours." His injured ribs still ached, yet he labored anyway, raising a new roof for our shared future. Late that night, after children slept and fireflies pulsed beyond the veranda, we opened Rawlings's letter. Federal funding approved to expand the school, contingent on local governance by a mixed board. Silas laughed low, joyous. "The board will need a principal," he said. Light flickered in his eyes. "And a woman who shoots straight." I laid my head on his shoulder, listening to river murmur. The weight of ring on my finger felt lighter than air, heavier than destiny. For the first time since chains slipped, my wrists, the horizon stretched unbroken. Yet I know storms can return. Sheriff Billings's allies whisper revenge. Elections loom. A single match could reignite hatred. Still, I choose hope, a daily, deliberate act, 'cause I have tasted fear and found courage sweeter. I have seen ignorance and found knowledge brighter. I have been priced and sold and yet proven priceless. Tomorrow we will ring the bell atop the rebuilt porch. And children will race barefoot into lessons that once cost blood. I will write their names on slate, pressing chalk hard so dust lingers, in sunlight like tiny constellations. I will teach them that letters form words, words form truths, and truths spoken loud can topple walls. And if night riders ever return, they will not find a lone woman singing lullabies. They will find a community armed with alphabet and anthem, with courage fed by memory of smoke and river water. They will find us ready. Silas whispers now from the doorway. He holds Emmy's ragdoll patched with new cloth, asks if I'm coming. To bed, I glance one last time at moonlit desks, waiting for dawn. "I'm coming," I say, because the future waits for no one and I intend to meet it wide awake. The bell clanged at sunrise. A bright iron peal ricocheting across dew silver. Grass. Children poured in barefoot, ribboned, patched. Fumed each, carrying a slate and yesterday's curiosity polished into new resolve. I greeted them at the steps, chalk dust already ghosting my fingertips. The little ones called me Teacher Bell. The older boys tipped imaginary hats and tried not to grin. Inside, sunlight striped the pine floor. The air held that hush fragile. Eager the moment before, learning ignites. I started with a riddle about the river, letters tucked into currents. The class giggled, then settled as words unfurled on the board. Soon voices rose in unison, sounding out the Emancipation Preamble. Hearing black and white children stitching freedom into syllables felt like mending cloth with gold. Thread. The more you pulled, the stronger it shimmered. After lessons, Silas met me on the porch with fresh newsprint ink, smudging his thumb. The Savannah Chronicle headline shouted, "Special election set for January. Redeemers. Promise return to old order." Translation, men who lost the war now vying to win the peace, by ballot. He exhaled slow. They captured the legislature, bureau funds dry up. Our school could starve. I traced the ragged bullet scar still marring the column beside us. "Then we feed it ourselves," I said. He kissed my paint-flecked knuckle. "Some days," he chuckled, "I forget which of us was raised free." That afternoon, a wagon rattled in from outskirts. loaded with turnips and collards payment from parents who had no coins but plenty of gratitude. We stacked produce in the pantry, laughter echoing as Emmy insisted each squash sport a chalk smile. Yet when dusk settled, I caught old Jonah, formerly enslaved sharecropper, standing beneath the magnolia, hat twisting in his hands. "Ma'am," Kay murmured, eyes sliding sideways. "Heard talk down at Crossroads store. Folks say Sheriff Billings's kin raising bounty for anybody who shuts your school." Silas stepped forward, cane tapping, but I lifted a palm. "Thank you, Jonah," I said. "Knowledge is the strongest shield." He tipped hat, vanished into twilight. That night I drafted lesson plans by lamplight while Silas mended desks. Wind rattled shutters, every creak stirred memory of torches. Still, fear found no foothold. We'd faced bullets and river currents, empty threats felt like nettles after fire. A week later, the schoolhouse hosted its first public recital. Children recited Whitman, Wheatley, and scriptures, voices wavering, then soaring. Townsfolk filled benches until lungs steamed the windows. Even Miss Eloise Fairfield, the banker's widow, who once crossed the street to avoid me, sat front row, lace gloves folded. When Emmy and little Joseph Rivers read the Gettysburg Address alternately, applause rumbled like distant cannons, this time aimed at ignorance, but not all hearts softened. Outside, 3 men lingered near the cotton press, spitting, chew, and muttering. I recognized one, the grocer, who sold us flour begrudgingly. Their stares followed us home. 2 nights later, a crate arrived without sender. Inside, a charred piece of porch beam from the night rider's raid, tied with twine. No note. Message clear. Silas's jaw worked, but he only set the wood on the hearth and let it burn to ash. "You build new beams," he said. As election neared, tension thickened the air. Flyers declaring one race, one rule littered roads. Freedmen wishing to register were turned away or worse. Dr. Dale treated 2 men beaten near courthouse steps. Our school attendance dipped. Some parents feared retribution. I visited cabins by lantern, reminding them chains rust faster than courage. Slowly, children returned, carrying bruises and determination. On Christmas Eve, the church choir sang under oil lamps, strung along Whitford Hall's porch. We served sorghum cakes, and both races danced clumsy reels while frost silvered the grass. Laughter cracked the ice of old hate just a little. After guests departed, Moses rode in hard from Savannah, coat crusted with sleet. Billings escaped. "Transport," he panted. Rail guards found their locks tampered. "Pinkertons think he headed this direction," said he swore to finish the job at Whitford's place. Silas closed his eyes, exhaled through clenched teeth. I felt my heartbeat settle into that steady soldier's rhythm I'd learned on Swamp Night. "Let 'em come," I said. "This time, the whole county watches." We fortified, marshals camped in the orchard, townspeople formed night watches. Even skeptical sharecroppers offered rifles inherited from grandfathers who'd fought on opposite sides. Fear turned to forge, resolved to steal. December 30th, dawn purple on horizon. A single rider approached under truce flag. It was Rawlings. "Intelligence says Billings leads 20 men, he warned. "They plan a spectacle burn the school during opening hour." He laid a telegram on our table. "Federal troops delayed by flooding, arrival unknown." Rawlings looked from Silas to me. "Legally, I can't order civilians to stay, but if you evacuate now, we avoid bloodshed." Silas's gaze shifted too. Emmy's copybook folded beside the lamp. "If we run, hate wins," he said. I felt his hands seek mine. Our fingers intertwined around Papa's Bible, which lay open to Proverbs. "The righteous are bold as a lion." New Year's morning broke bright and cold. Frost crystals glittered on fence rails like silent applause from heaven. I rang the bell, one by one. Small boots crunched on frozen soil. Each step an act of rebellion. Silas stood sentry at the gate, cane in one hand, shotgun in the other. I welcomed pupils, chalking hope in big letters across the board. Emmy raised her hand. "What's hope, Mama Bell?" I smiled. The promise that tomorrow can be better than today. The courage to write it so. Outside, hoofbeats. Gathered deep, deliberate drums rolling from the east. Rawlings positioned marshals along the lane. Townsfolk with rifles flanked the cotton rows. Through the window, I glimpsed Billings at the column's head. Scarred cheek flushed crimson. Eyes burning revenge. My breath stayed calm. I handed Emmy a primer, pressed her small finger to the letter H. She looked up. Will they hurt us? Letters protect us, I whispered. And the truth we speak with them. Billings halted 20 yards out, raised a torch, called for me by name. I stepped onto the porch, children's recitation drifting behind. B, C. Silas beside me, Rawlings ahead. Billings's gaze slid to Silas. Move aside, traitor. The girl belongs to the past. Silas's voice rang like church bell. She belongs to no one. Billings spurred forward, and the world seemed to freeze. In that breath between hate and hope. Between the Old South's dying snarl and the New South's first full heartbeat, Billings dug his spurs. Torch arcing like a comet toward the schoolhouse door. Rawlings shouted. Marshals raised rifles, but I was faster. I stepped down the porch and met Billings in the yard, arms spread, voice ringing crisp over the children's brave recitation. Sheriff. I called. You lost the war, the trial, and the night. Will you lose your soul too? His horse skidded. To a halt inches away, hot breath ghosting my forehead. The riders behind him fanned out, rifles half lifted. Unsure whether to aim at a woman in a calico dress or the federal badges glinting in early sun. Silence cracked like ice. Billings's eyes darted to the windows where small faces watched. Move, he growled. That house of lies dies today. I shook my head. Those children carry truth in their hands, and truth doesn't burn, so easy. He swung the torch. I grabbed the haft. Flames licked my sleeve, but I yanked downward, twisting with all the fury stolen years had stored in my bones. The torch hit frost-hard dirt, sputtering. Billings lunged to grab his revolver. A shotgun click echoed Silas. Perched steady on the porch rail, despite his bandaged ribs. One pull, Sheriff, and you'll answer to God sooner than you planned. Silas announced, voice calm as Winter Creek. Billings's nostrils flared. You'd shoot a white man for her? I'd shoot a devil for my family, Silas replied. Behind Billings, some riders shifted in their saddles, uneasy. The world had turned overnight. Bullets fired at widowers and schoolteachers could ricochet into headlines and prison bars. They'd seen that lesson in Savannah. Billings spat. Laws on my side. He thrust a crumpled sheet another forged. Warrant, Rawlings advanced, badge gleaming. Federal law overrides counterfeit scribbles. He snatched the paper, tore it in half, and tossed it into melting frost. Deputy, you are under arrest for jailbreak, arson conspiracy, and attempted murder. 2 marshals moved. Billings wheeled his horse, desperate to flee. But Moses and Elijah had circled behind, blocking exit with a wagon stacked high in collard greens. Caught between steel barrels and green leaves, Billings froze. His hand trembled on his pistol. For a moment I saw the boy he once was taught that skin is destiny, that power is a birthright. Fear lived there, gnawing. Drop it, I said softly. Torch smoke still curling off my singed cuff. Choose a new ending. His fingers eased open. Revolver thudded to dirt. Rawlings's men hauled him down, snapping irons over his wrists. As they led him past the porch, children's voices floated out, finishing their alphabet with triumphant shout, Z. Billings flinched. Maybe those 26 letters weighed heavier on him than all the shackles he'd clasped on others. The riders dispersed. Some tipped their hats in wary respect before trotting off. Rawlings loaded Billings into a wagon bound for the federal garrison. Sun climbed, thawing frost into shining beads that slid off bullet-scarred boards new tears for old wounds. Silas rested the shotgun, exhaling months of dread. I pressed salve on my blistered arm. Emmy fussed over the burn until I kissed her nose. The bell rang again, not for alarm this time, but for class. They came to stop us learning, Joseph Rivers whispered, eyes wide. And what did we do instead? I asked. We spelled the whole alphabet. He beamed. That's right, I said, voice thick with wonder. We turned bullets into letters. Winter yielded to russet spring. Federal funds arrived. Neighbors black, white, and somewhere. Between raised a new wing on the schoolhouse. We planted a garden where torch grass once blackened earth. Collards, sweet peas, and magnolia seedlings grew side by side, roots mingling beneath. The soil, same as children's laughter, mingled beneath the rafters. Silas's wounds knit slow, but sure. On warm evenings, I found him reading Douglas aloud, to field hands who answered with hymns that braided grief and gladness into one sound. Sometimes he'd pause mid-sentence, eyes shining, and pull me close enough that our heartbeats blended like two notes finding perfect harmony. Pinkerton Detectives. Escorted Jericho Lyle to a penitentiary near Atlanta. Ledger pages copied into Federal Archives. Newspapers from Boston to New Orleans printed our story. Widower and former slave defeat night riders. Open integrated school. Praise flooded in, along with threats written in shaky script. I kept every letter each a reminder. Freedom is a garden needing both rain and vigilance. On Emmy's 6th birthday, we held a picnic beneath the mended magnolia. Children performed a play they'd written about courage. Emmy strutted in paper hat, declaring education is liberty set to music. Laughter rippled through cotton fields that once heard only weeping. After guests left, Silas led me to the riverbank where fireflies stitched gold threads through dusk. He knelt painful still, but proud and produced a ring of wrought iron, overlaid with filigree gold. Made from the last chain I found in storage, he said. Melted, remade, renamed. Tears blurred river lights. The old promise we'd whispered in fever words became vows spoken aloud beneath stars and cicada choir. Moses read from Corinthians. Elijah strummed a fiddle. Dr. Dale's wife threw magnolia petals that stuck in my curls. Emmy danced circles, chanting, 2 rings, 1 family. Now I stand at this porch railing, sunrise painting chalk dust into floating gold. Children arrive with slates and questions, and I greet each one by name. I will never forget the crack of gunfire, the taste of river mud, or the smell of burning porch beam, but memory is a plow. It turns soil, burying bitterness, readying ground for seeds of something better. If my tale finds you, whether you listen from a high-rise in New, if you're a farmhouse in Kansas, remember, freedom isn't a proclamation read once and filed away. It is a practice, daily, stubborn, spelled out letter by letter in classrooms and courtyards, sung in lullabies and sworn in ballads. So tell me, what part of this story struck your heart? If you've ever faced a night rider of your own fear, prejudice, doubt, and stood your ground. Which letter are you writing into the world today? Share your thoughts below. I read every line. Your words join ours in the long sentence of justice still being written, tap. Like if hope burned brighter than hate in these chapters. Hit subscribe to stay with Heartland Confessions, where we turn forgotten voices into living stories. And ring the bell, so the next time freedom's alphabet rings out, you'll hear it first. Until then, this is Annabelle Turner Whitford, teacher, wife, mother, reminding you, the strongest schools are built on scars that refuse to stay wounds, and the truest love is the one that writes new laws in the heart before they ever reach the books.